The rain hammered against the glass walls of the 32nd floor, blurring the city lights below into streaks of silver and gold. Inside the boardroom of Halverson Global, silence ruled. A silence so heavy it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Every face around the marble table was pale, tense, frozen. On the massive screen at the far end, red numbers blinked, a financial disaster unfolding in real time. $75 million. Gone. Misallocated, misplaced, or simply miscalculated, no one knew yet. What they did know was that a single decimal had just shaken one of the world's largest investment firms to its core. And sitting quietly in the corner, wearing a worn-out blue shirt and clutching a notebook that had seen better days, was a man no one really noticed until he stood up. If you believe in kindness, redemption, and second chances, then pause for a moment and show your support. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal, because stories like this remind us that hope can rise from the most unexpected places. His name was Noah Grant, a 38-year-old single dad who worked as a junior data analyst. He wasn't supposed to be in that meeting. He wasn't even on the official invite list. He was there because his manager, Sarah, had called in sick that morning, and Noah had volunteered to cover. He almost didn't come. His daughter, Ava, had a fever, and their apartment heater had stopped working again. But when you're a single father scraping by, you don't miss a chance to show up. So, he dropped Ava at a neighbor's and promised he'd be back before sunset. The CEO, Eleanor Halverson, was pacing the length of the room, her heels striking the floor like hammers of anxiety. The mistake and error in a cross-border merger file had rerouted $75 million into the wrong holding account. It wasn't gone forever, but the implications were catastrophic: investor trust shattered, media ready to feast, and a billion-dollar reputation at stake. The legal team was already whispering damage control. The financial team was sweating through their shirts. And Noah, unnoticed, was flipping through datasheets, scanning numbers with eyes that carried both exhaustion and quiet brilliance. For weeks, Noah had been buried under spreadsheets, correcting small inconsistencies that no one cared about. He'd been the invisible guardian of precision, the man who saw patterns where others saw numbers. But life hadn't been kind to him. 3 years ago, he'd lost his wife, Clara, to a car accident on her way to pick up Ava from school. Since then, Noah's life had become a delicate balance of grief and responsibility. He cooked simple dinners, read bedtime stories by candlelight when the power got cut off, and worked long hours just to keep their world afloat. He didn't complain. He didn't dream. He just survived until that morning when destiny quietly invited him into the storm. Who approved this transaction? Eleanor demanded, her voice shaking but sharp. A few people shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke. The CFO muttered something about a data sync error between the European and Asian divisions. The IT head began explaining latency issues. But no explanation was enough. The numbers were bleeding red. Eleanor slammed her hand on the table. We're hours away from a press call, and we can't even explain how this happened? That's when Noah, almost without realizing it, whispered, "It's not a sync issue." The words were barely audible. Heads turned. Eleanor stopped pacing. "What did you say?" she asked. Noah's heart raced. He hadn't planned to speak, but something deep inside him, an instinct honed from years of quiet observation, urged him on. He stood up, his voice trembling at first but growing steadier with each word. "It's not a system error. It's a decimal displacement in the asset conversion sheet. Line 42, column G." The CFO frowned. "Impossible. We checked that file 3 times. Noah walked to the screen, his steps hesitant yet purposeful. He connected his laptop, typed rapidly, and opened a sheet buried 3 layers deep within the system. Rows of numbers flooded the screen, a maze of codes and formulas. Then, with one small movement, he highlighted a single formula cell. Everyone leaned forward. "The exchange rate here," Noah said softly, "was multiplied instead of divided. It reversed the transfer ratio between the USD and HKD accounts. That's your $75 million gap." The room went dead silent. Then, one by one, the executive's eyes widened. The numbers recalculated instantly as Noah corrected the formula. Within seconds, the red turned green. The balance restored. 75 million, back where it belonged. It had taken the entire team 6 hours to find nothing, and Noah, just 27 seconds to fix everything. Eleanor Halverson stood still for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she walked toward Noah. The entire room held its breath. Everyone expected anger, disbelief, maybe even condescension. Instead, Eleanor extended her hand and said, "You just saved this company." Her voice was softer now, touched with genuine respect. "Who are you?" Noah hesitated. "Noah Grant, ma'am. Junior Data Analyst. Contract position." A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Eleanor nodded, her gaze steady. "Not anymore." Then she turned to the others. "Everyone else, take notes. This man just did what a dozen of you couldn't." Meeting adjourned. When the room cleared, Noah stood there alone for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. He felt his chest tighten, not from pride, but from something deeper. Relief. For once in years, he had done something that truly mattered. He gathered his laptop and walked out quietly. He didn't even notice Eleanor watching him leave, her expression thoughtful, almost emotional. Later that afternoon, Noah returned to his apartment, a small, two-room space filled with the smell of instant noodles and children's drawings taped to the fridge. Ava was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching cartoons. "Daddy," she said, her face lighting up. "Did you save the world today?" Noah laughed softly and kissed her forehead. "Maybe just a little part of it." He didn't tell her about the applause he'd received later that day when Eleanor called him back into the boardroom. He didn't mention the promotion letter sitting unread in his inbox, offering him a full-time role as senior analyst with benefits, bonuses, and something even rarer, security. He didn't talk about how Eleanor had shared her own story, how she'd once been a single mother too, raising her son while climbing through a world that rarely forgave mistakes. Instead, he told Ava that everything was going to be okay. And for the first time, he believed it. In the following weeks, things began to change. Noah's name started circulating in emails he wasn't even copied on. The CEO herself began stopping by his desk, asking for his insights on projects. His colleagues, once dismissive, now sought his help. But Noah didn't let it go to his head. He still took the same bus home. Still packed Ava's lunch with little hand-drawn notes. Still lived with humility carved deep into his bones. Yet, beneath the quiet routine, there was a spark, a small but growing sense of worth. Months later, Halverson Global hosted its annual leadership gala. Noah didn't plan to go. He didn't own a suit, and parties weren't his thing. But Eleanor insisted, sending him a tailored black jacket and a handwritten note that simply said, "Some heroes deserve to be seen." That night, under the chandeliers and camera flashes, Noah stood awkwardly at the edge of the ballroom. Eleanor took the stage and began her speech. She spoke about resilience, integrity, and unseen heroes who kept the heart of a company beating. Then, to Noah's utter shock, she said his name. "Sometimes, greatness doesn't come from the top floor," she said, her voice echoing through the hall. "It comes from a small cubicle, from a man who carries love in one hand and responsibility in the other." The audience turned to where Noah stood, and the applause rose like a wave. Noah's eyes burned with unshed tears. In that moment, he wasn't just a single father struggling to survive. He was proof that even broken lives could rebuild miracles. When Eleanor stepped down and shook his hand once again, she whispered, "You reminded me why I started this company in the first place." Outside, under the cool night sky, Noah called Ava. Her sleepy voice answered, "Daddy, did you save the world again?" He smiled. "Something like that, sweetheart." If this story touched your heart, take a moment to pause and reflect. Don't forget to